Yoga and Family Relationships, How to Combine and Improve by Andrey Verba, Aum.ru yoga instructor. So, yoga in family relationships, how to combine and improve. If you remember yesterday's lecture that we looked at, then respectively, on the grounds of the ancient scriptures, we can draw such a conclusion that, paradoxical as it may seem, but people are positioned on different stages of evolution. This is unfortunately a reality. People, depending on the maturity of their souls, will be interested in totally different things. Respectively, if a person, to put it mildly, hasn't accumulated a proper experience yet, he'll be jumping from one thing to the other. He'll be entering into some relations, then entering into another, and as a matter of principle, many do not rest on that. But there are people who choose a certain stability, and respectively, for them, one relationship can be sufficient for a lifetime. Some strive for one form of life, others strive for another. For some, stability is important, and others, on the contrary, need quick changes of relations. Everything has to change. That's a fact, and as a matter of principle, life speaks about it itself. So we will have to again speak about those four castes, or varnas, which we discussed yesterday. Why is it important? Because, as paradoxical as it may seem, the people's attitude towards life may be different. And respectively, if a person lives as a Vaishya, then good. He, as a matter of principle, doesn't have to change anything. On the other hand, if a person is a leader by nature, he's constantly improving something in the world around him. Hope he improves himself too. Then, respectively, the relations which are around him will be also changing quite often, and this is absolutely normal. So, back to the castes. So, in the first place, as we considered yesterday, there are Shudras or Smrds. On the second, there are Vaishyas or Veses. On the third, there are Kshatriyas or Knights. On the fourth, there are wizards, soothsayers or brahmins. So if you are going to go forward consciously, you need to understand on what stage of evolution you are now, what category you can refer to, and what means do you need in order to do that. Keep in mind that during even one lifetime, your caste may change, depending on what views you have now. If you are going to evolve, then whether you want it or not, your views, intentions, habits, all of this will change. An ordinary person changes throughout his or her life as it is, but a person who starts to exercise differs from an ordinary person because his changes to some extent are expected. If an ordinary person who is blown by the wind of change, according to his or her destiny, faces one problem, then another, and after some time, surprisingly, he finds himself where he did not presume. Practitioner has it all absolutely differently. Practitioners have to presume beforehand where they might be and respectively prepare for it. We are in the same situation. It's difficult for us to be with this kind of friends. But we are not selfish, and we try to maintain friendly relations, thinking that maybe the person will change his mind. Oh, stop. Let's not interrupt each other. You say, I haven't talked with the girl, and you're already with your friends. Well, let's talk with the girl, and then return to the friends, step by step. We have enough time today. And how would you like it to be? You should know that even if you didn't practice yoga, you still would have everything changing around you. Do you accept that this is possible? Yes, I'm just a person who, well, have a man emotions. Well, if the bad energy is gone, then he already feels better, right? Oh, yes. Well, it's logical. There is no contradiction. It means that we must start forming some conscious worldview. I told you as it is, and now we're going to talk about theory. That is, what are the odds? This is how people ask. I can't say about your odds. That depends on what karmic connection you have with this person. That is, how much previous lives you had and in what hypostasis. Unfortunately, in Kali-Yuga, in a time in which we live, according to the scriptures, most of your relatives, friends, and loved ones are the people with whom you have negative karmic relationship. It's paradoxical, but it's in the scriptures, it's not even my point of view. My observation only suggests that there is a certain logic in this. I will explain, I'll even draw so it would be more understandable. There are 4 yugas, the so-called 4 development periods of the universe. They differ in the place the planet Earth takes relative to the center of the galaxy. If you have ever seen the pictures, then where a universe is drawn, you can see such a spheroid. Do you understand what I'm talking about? That is such a spiral, which is to a certain extent revolves. Like a trajectory? It's a star gathering. No, and it looks like this. If you take a look, type in photos of the universe on the internet, for example, and look at different images. Sooner or later you will find a photo that will differ. These are thin lines that I've drawn. In reality, these leaves are much broader, but nevertheless, they are spheroid. The bottom line is that all this moving around the axis, but nevertheless, it is in such an ellipse. And our planet is in one of these sleeves that is quite far from the center of the galaxy. And so, when this sleeve turns and approximately is positioned in this place, then here there is a small distance, and here a big distance. And there is such a theory that when we are the maximum distance from the center of the galaxy, these are the hardest times, which, how should I put this? If, for example, split this in half, then here, respectively, would be the dark side of our lives, here would be the bright. And when our solar system and our planet is close to the center of the galaxy, it's thought that there is more energy of mindfulness, wisdom, and light, and therefore the times are more mellow. After all, scriptures describe, it's not a make-believe, not a fairy tale, how approximately 250 million years ago there were people living here on this planet. If the ruler was righteous, in particular, there is description of the way Rama lived, the way he ruled, and of the fragrance of the earth during his times. There was full harmony with nature. There were no disasters. Think about that. During the day, the weather was always good. Rain occurred only during the night, meaning it rained when people were sleeping. So it was like a person woke up, new day, new life. They were never sick. Such concept as infant mortality did not even exist. It was nonsense that if a baby that had been born on the planet to gain experience died, that was an absurdity. All right, I won't advertise the good times to you. We are now, to put it mildly, in a completely different era. This is the reverse side of the happiness that you have experienced in past lives. Kali-Yuga is necessary to compensate for your lives. When you've lived very well, as they say, all is good, all is great, you've experienced joy. Some of you were rulers, some did other things. Actually, all of you were rulers and did other things, because it's believed that a person starts to practice yoga only when in his past lives he acquired maximum experience possible, so now he's sick of it all. That's why he starts digging slightly in himself. The person who has avidity to learn himself, to change the world for the better, that person learns, changes, and in general tries, even in these conditions of the spiritual night, to somehow evolve. Look, what I'm trying to say here is when you, during the good times, had karma to appear with your relatives, families, and etc., you lived in a situation when everything was good. Good relatives, everything's fine, so everything was good. Can you assume that? Imagine that all your dreams you have, all these dreams are realized in one form or another. But after all, there is no such thing in nature or space that everything is always good. There has to be a period when, to put it mildly, there are difficulties, or to put it in a more modern way, a mess. That's why, and this is absolutely just, you must have another life in the age of Kali-Yuga, when there is much more mess than you would like. And that's normal that you are born here, and in the age of Kali-Yuga your relatives not always act as you like. On the other hand, from their point of view, you're acting somehow strange, refusing from eating meat. That's crazy. No more sausage to poison yourselves. For them, you're also causing lots of troubles. Do you really think it's easy for your relatives? Really? They're probably ashamed of even telling on the phone that their daughter or son, granddaughter, brother, father of the son-in-law became a vegetarian. Can you imagine that? Ashamed of telling. What? Many even threw out their TV. Can you imagine that? Sectarians. They go through lots of suffering because of you. It's just like a nightmare. They are telling you, don't you have any conscience? Why take a seat, have a drink as a normal person? Yeah, and you're saying, no, dry law. Well, why am I saying all this? On the one hand, it's all loves, but on the other, you're really creating problems for each other. They don't want to live like you, and you cannot live like them. This is classic Kali-Yuga, so according to the scriptures, it's considered to be a special period where souls reincarnate, say, in a family of mother and son, but a number of lifetimes ago, they were terrible enemies when they hated each other. They need to reborn, to put it mildly, become friends now. What? Yes, compensation, indeed. There is such a thing that if you have some kind of an enemy, and there are people experiencing hatred towards a person, then it's like a deposit for the future. You will be forced to be born and live closely, no matter what the situation will be. But nevertheless, you will be forced to. So, Kali-Yuga, from what our discussion has started, is a necessary form of imperfect life. However hard you may try to improve yourself, however hard you may try to change yourself, to hope that everything will be idealistic, well, is naive. Just naive because of the times we live in. You cannot, no matter how much you change yourself in a certain country, do such a thing that this region would have only good weather. Won't work. Why? Because all your intentions are certainly wonderful and great, but there is still the reality of other people who are close to you. And it's the views of these people that will condition how you see the world in front of you, how you experience it. And the world, unfortunately, is conditioned by the power of thought, and very, very much. And that's a fact. Have I answered your question? Of course, aspiring is necessary, but guaranteeing that you will be able to settle with this exact person, I would not do that. Moreover, if you are an adult and you see what you had there, 10 years, for example, you had a certain beloved, for example, I assure you that in 19% of the cases, that's not the person you're interested now. Now, 10 years after, you have probably another beloved. And the most paradoxical thing is that 10 years after, perhaps the third person would become your beloved. So that's the usual case for the most people. So no matter how much you would change yourself for the sake of this beloved, you may change yourself, but you will have happiness with another person, perhaps. Have I saddened you? Okay. Yes, hold on. Concerning friends, right? Oh, it's the same. Friends, they're good. Don't need to abandon them? Well, of course you don't, and why? You are absolutely right, reasoning as a yogi. If you have capability or you accept to tolerate a person and his strangeness within reasonable limits, then no problem. Maintain relationships. Moreover, keep in mind that if you have a close person as a friend, brother, sister, etc., you already have a karmic relationship with this person. Even if you will separate in this life, sometime later, in some other life, you will be together again. Once again, you will be building relationships. This is absolutely normal. So even if you had a quarrel with someone, it's only for a while. 2-3 lives after, you'll meet again. No problems at all. Sometimes you want to say, let's deal with this now, because we understand that the problem is there, and then, well, please deal with it. For this, yoga practice is necessary, so you would understand when to do something and when not to. If you will feel the space around you subtler, you'll be able to, as they say, intuitively understand should you say something or not. Well, you can agree that in some cases, some words you'll say, but those words will be the poison for the person, meaning they will irritate him. He will remember you for life as an unfeeling person. In different situations, the same words you said to the person, he will take them calmly. Recently, I've encountered a situation when there are 2 people. Basically, I'm speaking with 2 people. So I asked, why don't you speak to Masha? Well, we had a fight. I said, what happened? Well, there was a situation, I thought she would support me and she didn't support me, I was hurt. Well, now they don't fight. In kindergarten, really. But for someone, this kindergarten is important. A person's upset. Were he stronger, were he wiser, he would not even notice that. What's your question? Do I understand correctly that compatibility and the rest is due to the level of evolution based on costs or varnas, as you said? About compatibility, in what sense? For example, communication. Friends, why communication? Interests are different and interest can be due to costs? Yes, absolutely. Shudra's interest is something specific. Vaishya's interest, well, it's obvious. If a person strives only for pleasure, then he... Just recall any friend of yours who is passionate, and for whom some pleasures and enjoyments are the most important. Did you recall such a person? And now imagine a different person who is a family person, lives steadily, calmly. If you would say to him, hey, let's go fishing, and there on the fishing trip we will have, well, what do they usually have there? Beer. Yes, beer. Family man would think, well, here I come after the fishing, drunk, and my beloved Mary is saying to me, where have you been gadding about? And in addition to that will call me something bad. So I'm not going anywhere because the relationship with Mary is far more important to me than fishing with beer. Do you accept that such reflections may occur? And such a person for that stability turns down some forms of entertainment. Therefore, those friends who are accustomed to beer, fishing, and all alike will say you're bad. The same goes for a night. They have quite different interests. To go shooting somewhere, something else to do. For them, family is a quite different matter. I think you've asked a question. I was saying that friends are true, but these acquaintances who will just fall out, perhaps. But as the experience shows, friends, they too appear not without any reason. Most often people start to become friends only after they go through a kind of cataclysm, meaning going through hardships, a friendship which is verified by testing. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? You're right that those people who seek only enjoyments, amusements, diversity of life, that's the main problem in life. Changes, so to speak. Do you have any other questions? Well, maybe that is so, but on the other hand, now society is becoming more lewd, spoiled, and degraded. If you had elderly relatives with whom you communicated, grandparents, if you have ever heard how they communicated among themselves, people's interest, let's say, 100 years ago, and what's happening in the society right now, this is a huge difference. Or let's say now people compare today's education to education that was in so-called pre-revolutionary Russia. Do you know what math problems children were solving? Do you have any idea? Well, internet has it. There are descriptions of the program for an average village school, but problems they solved, youngsters in bust shoes, but nevertheless, they developed their minds not as modern school children. While, and respectively, the media contributes immensely to the decay of the society. Whatever you might say, this is a new religion, which is located in almost every house. This is a certain problem. So, on the one hand, yes, you're right. Perhaps some karmic knots, as you call them, come untied much faster. But on the other hand, you must look at things objectively. People often make some choices, which then they refuse, not thanks to the reason, meaning a person initially makes a choice because he believes fully in the uprightness, correctness of his choice, and decides to enter a certain relationship. After some time, that person makes sure he was wrong, meaning he made a mistake and now he's trying to fix it. Still, we're discussing a situation when people can think rationally. But what you said were feelings, and feelings are usually prevail over a person so that the person does not think about anything, but just does things. Influenced by feelings, the person commits certain acts, which, to put it mildly, sometimes can be very strange. Friends, do you have any other questions? If you do, then go ahead. The next life is the reward or the punishment for what he's done in the previous one, and if so, why we don't remember? Why nobody remembers? Well, why does no one remember? But they do remember. Yeah, we do. Well, our website om.ru has a special section called Reincarnation. If possible, look it up. There is some material put together concerning this topic, and in particular, there are research examples of Professor Maudi. Maudi conducted specific studies on the theme of reincarnation. They cover a very important topic, that children under 12 years old can still remember something, but the older a person gets, the harder to remember. Well, hold on. You said that they can draw certain parallels, what they've done, what they haven't done, and I'm speaking about the fact itself. Do the memories of past lives occur? There is an answer. Yes. Well, on the one hand, yes, it's important, but it's important to who? Well, the problem is that may I use your example to explain? You have lived, say, 30 years in this world. You, when you were born in this world, were named a certain name. The society around you has formed your personality completely. From your past life, you could only bring certain preferences, or, on the contrary, rejections. Some things you liked intuitively, and some things, on the contrary, pushed you away. But the fact of the matter is that your personality has nothing to do with your soul. That is, roughly speaking, for your soul, you are a software error. It's not just about you, but about any human being. Why such a statement exists? Because according to the scriptures, there is a certain center or a certain point in the center of you. Someone says it's located in the heart. This point is just the same observer, which accumulates experience. Depending on what kind of experience this Jivatma is interested in, it almost by its own choice gets into certain situations and makes its own choice. Agree that you for sure have come across such situations when you wisely understood that you must not do this thing, but you did. You understood that it would be bad, but you did it anyway. The mind understood it all, but he couldn't help it. Did you notice such a thing? What does it mean? It means that there are certain forces which are even within the person, but they are much more powerful in relation to the person's choice than the person's mind. If such Jivatma lives a number of lives, it becomes overgrown with the so-called soul. But it's only when a person gets used to certain moral actions. So the soul as such is formed when a person overcomes the moral limitations. And some people have no soul, that's a fact, because they can't. They are not accustomed to, they do not have any moral behavior. On the contrary, they do immoral deeds and accumulate quite a different karma, to put it mildly. If there is a soul, each new life you form at the very surface. Besides, the self can in 10 years have certain preferences, a certain personality. In 20 years, it's different, 30, 40, and so forth, meaning this personality is constantly changing. So why I asked you a certain question and why it takes this long to explain? To the past lives which were yours and that you theoretically could remember, you have no relation. It's not your past life. These are the past lives of the soul and Jivatma. It's them who lived, and you, roughly speaking, are an alternating substance, which is right now. You ask a question. It would be nice if you knew all this, remembered, and drew conclusions. Yes, on the one hand, it's good, but on the other hand, try to understand that you, roughly speaking, got in jail being where you don't like and you would like to change something. And you would change it if you had a specific understanding of how to do it. But the thing is that if your sentence is controlled by specific authorities, for them it's important that you would serve your sentence fully. And if you will understand in the middle of the path that you are doing something wrong, you just won't serve your sentence in your life. A very good example, because you feel bad in jail, and when a person feels bad in jail, he understands why he has gotten there in the first place. And apparently he did something wrong, and yes, apparently there are authorities which make him sit there. And I'm saying that now the situation is that someone cannot understand why. It's not important. Most do not understand. I'm just trying to say that this external observer, who you are as a person, individual, has nothing to do with for what the person's suffering. That's why he cannot make ends meet. Moreover, there are authorities who are interested in that person would not make ends meet. That is why they don't remember. Using this jail example, I was trying to explain to you that if you were able, roughly speaking, to change your destiny on the grounds of a certain realizations, you would automatically destroy numbers of processes which you are destined to go through. They are already made for you, for your education. Well, self-comprehension is necessary, not just... Yes, but the thing is that you see this from your perspective, your position, but you have to bring a certain amount of joy or sorrow to other people. You're completely built in a particular system, which is called life. And even if you will change yourself and you pull yourself out, then according to the plan, roughly speaking, you have to make a certain number of mistakes, for example. From these mistakes, other people will suffer. There's, roughly speaking, a written plan, and what we are discussing and you're saying to realize and change and all be better, I agree with you, it will be better. Hence, what's the conclusion? To know what awaits you and that is inevitable. Well, why inevitable? I mean, in the plan you talked about, there's a plan and this is inevitability. True, but this plan may have slight variations. To change it dramatically would be problematic for other observers. To adjust a little would be acceptable, and there is such a way out. People through regression, through a regressive hypnosis, try to dig in themselves to search for the reasons why they have such a situation. Most often, these situations are considered from a problematic viewpoint, when a person is faced with a choice, to do something or not to do. Then they go to a hypnotist and try, based on the words of the hypnotist, to make this choice. In my opinion, not the most rational option. I see a longer path is to practice yoga by yourself, to try to develop inner peace and to go inside yourself independently. That's more reliable. You'll have confidence that nobody influenced you, what you have seen. There are many techniques in yoga which allow you to encounter past lives. If you are interested, try, seek, and explore. Huh? Yes. What's your question? Can you explain where in this simplified diagram is Jivatma, soul, and consciousness? Where are they? And a brief description. This is a very simplified situation, and I'm speaking bookishly. It's a good comparison to the Russian matryoshka, where there's one in the other, lots and lots of little ones. It's believed that the smallest is your physical body. Everything else are energy structures, of which you consist. And this system, Jivatma, soul, consciousness, is when a 7-part matryoshka is shown by means of 3 parts. Spirit and other shells are in this interval. It's very simplified so that you could understand the basics. But in fact, if you understand that you as a person are a temporary value, it will be easier for you to understand why you change so quickly. Human is an incredibly not permanent creature. Incredibly not permanent. After some years, a person can change dramatically. In some cases, some events happen and the personality of the person changes drastically. It was one person before, a different one after. Particularly, the personality is broken by some dramatic, heavy events. And that can be a problem. You said that Jivatma is in the heart, but can it be in other place? Perhaps I'm not an expert on Jivatmas, from where they are watching you. I suppose it's not that fundamental. Hold on. You see often those who develop themselves, practice, those who are engaged in learning. It's associated with the yoga mat, retreat, mantras, books, and thus from this group, people are excluded like our grandparents. For a granny, a mat is a rug. Speaking about these definitions, do not the people like us segregate from a huge number of wonderful people who use maybe other techniques unconsciously? Do I understand you correctly that you do not exclude these techniques, but you're still saying practices? Okay. If a person, as you say, grandmas, rugs, soup, something else, it's a little different form of life. And in this case, most of these people do not have evolution in their worldview. They perceive life quite differently, and that's a fact. People who start improving themselves, that are connected with self-improvement, yoga, mantras, retreats, etc. These are the people who are trying to find a technique or a methodology or a tool set that will allow them to solve the problems that soups, rocks, and other things cannot solve. It turns out that there is a tool set that can allow you to change yourself at least, and to influence somehow the world around us at best. Systems that allow to change oneself, these are called self-improvement. Notice that I don't say yoga, 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 because self-improvement is wider and closer to reality. There are people who are bad at sitting on a mat, bad at asanas, but nevertheless, they can improve themselves at the spiritual level, the level of the soul. If a person overcomes certain limitations, let me give you an example. There is a person who doesn't even know that there is a mat, but he encounters a situation where he either turns his back and leaves it as is, or steps in and resolves the situation. In the first case, the person displays a certain cowardice. In the second case, there is a certain courage. What do you think? Is it self-development? We can say that our whole life that surrounds us with certain exams, limitations, is also self-development. Only this is a self-development, which is extremely difficult to control by a person. It's something spontaneous. The time has come, it's here, the person either passes the exam or not. Self-improvement system is a tool that you can use for self-development or not, living like everybody else. Have I answered your question? I agree, but I have concerns that some people, they listen to lectures and they use various techniques and they have thoughts like I and us, that's cool, and everyone else are underdeveloped. Fanaticism. And I would like to have that clarified, because I believe that people who live in accordance with the conscience, they are not underdeveloped. Well, you see, any answer to this fails. It's not possible to answer this question. See, we're talking about some narrow, specialized practices known as self-development. That's one thing. People who use some other tool set before using it, they should conduct a specific analysis to what result they will come to. There are people who live spontaneously. You mentioned religion. And see, that's perfect, if only there were a result from this life. If only they change not for the worse, but for the better. And theoretically, it's possible. Yoga differs from the religion in that there is a different tool set both in terms of the impact of energy on yourself and in terms of moral presets. If you draw a parallel between the Yam Niyama and if we're talking about Christianity, what Jesus recommended to his followers, you will find very many parallels. The very same 10 commandments which he gave, compared them to Yama. Look for the parallels. 70% is almost one and the same. The only question is that if, for example, in Christianity there are precepts only about what not to do, as I heard, then in yoga there are precepts that recommend what you should do. That's the difference. Otherwise, there are many similarities. Moreover, on our website, in Christianity section, there is reading material. Particularly, if you're Christian, if you're interested, search for the book of Nikolai Natovich called The Lost Years of Jesus, which he wrote in 1905. Read it. It's very intriguing. This book speaks about the years of Jesus Christ that are not described in the Bible. During these years, he was engaging in self-knowledge, self-development, and self-improvement. He was traveling to different countries. And that's one of the viewpoints. Why do Orthodox Christians deny this? It's possible, so there is no problem as such. And you can say that yogis somehow distinguish themselves, that they are special, and others just cook dinner, wiping their feet on the mat. Perhaps. But such fanaticism does happen, and it's not bad. This is a completely normal process. When a person becomes a fanatic for some time, beats his chest, pride appears within. And why do I speak so calmly about this? Because for some, pride is an absolutely normal phase that you have to go through. Why? Because pride is a person's self-defense mechanism from vile qualities once he had. So once upon a time there was a person. He had some primitive qualities, and he was constantly losing to those qualities, for example. Can you assume that? Anger, for example. Because I know that depending on what level the energy is in the person's body, the person can lose only because that there is not enough energy. As soon as the person gains energy, it will manifest as pride, and being on the pride level, he will no longer, out of his pride, perform these primitive things. Can you assume that? If he will continue to practice, even if out of pride, no matter, after 2 or 3 years he will understand this. Yes, I'm proud. Neighbors and yoga friends will suggest this many times. He will realize everything and calmly detach himself from that pride. Most importantly, he stopped burning his life in a primitive way. Therefore, one cannot say that some people are more primitive or more developed. All are at different stages of development. Just like in school, you come to the school and see a 10th grader who has already passed all the classes. So you might think, he's a good person, I can talk with him, and this is a first grader. He doesn't know a lot of things, but it's also pointless to look down on him. I hope I answered your question. So let's talk about costs, how self-development or self-improvement can be used in a family environment. And let's start with the Shudras, although there is little can be said about them. Shudras or Smrds, according to their karma, have created problems for themselves. They had believed at some stage of development in that you should take everything from life, so they wasted their lives away, resulting in being born in catastrophic conditions in future life. Simply catastrophic. In terms of material world, from the point of view of those emotions and energies that are around them, they literally survive. There is an Indian film called Slumdog Millionaire, where, well, it's very instructive. And we being in Russia in better conditions cannot even imagine the conditions in which people can live. The vast majority of people who come to India for the first time and see how people live there, they become shocked. They cannot imagine that this is possible. But it is possible. They live so that, well, Slumdog Millionaire can show you the conditions under which people can reincarnate. You cannot even imagine them. Why do you recommend to see it? Because those who live in grand style and don't think about the future, there is a possibility that they will reincarnate so that they really won't like it. This is the main problem. All that's left is to try living properly now. so that there would be no worse than what you have in this life, and that's the norm of life. Shudras reincarnate having a certain baggage of licentious life over their shoulders, meaning the person or the soul that at one time helped other souls in degrading itself appeared under the ice rink of degradation. It had to degrade. Imagine a person's being born who has no material support and survives as he can. What's left for him to do? How should he develop? His family is at the same level. He's recommended only one thing: to endure and to serve. Because if you could not control yourself in a previous life, then try to endure in this life, to endure as much as possible, and his life will be such an attempt to accumulate at least some amount of piety for the future lives. Did I explain clearly? Everybody understood? Well, from what I say, you shouldn't lose time relationship between how a person lived and that this leads him to the problems he's experiencing now. If he wants to evolve rather than to degrade further, he will have to endure and endeavor. And it's very difficult because a person who depends on those passions, when his passions gnaw him constantly, how can he endure? His passions have big plans for him, and they are trying to con the energy out of him by any means possible. However, even at the level of the Shudra, if a person will live, endure, and perform his prescribed duties, he will evolve, and for him it will be a system of self-development, because he will cultivate in himself this quality of patience. Although it would seem that they will not engage in yoga, will not lay the yoga mat, but nevertheless, at the expense of service to the community, they will gradually evolve. With Vaishya, everything's a lot more interesting, because with Vaishya, artisans or businessmen, everything is very simple. Any artisan or businessman has a certain amount of passions, which he is obliged to systematically satisfy. At the same time, he has a certain material wealth that more or less allows him to live. Respectively, it turns out that life consists of two parts: the passions that he has to satisfy and the opportunities that he can accumulate for the future life. It's all interconnected. Why it's interconnected? Because the number of person's passions directly determines his future life. If you think that satisfying passions will help you to evolve and grow, I assure you, there are no such examples in history. All people who have left behind some good, who are remembered only because they endured austerity and put effort into their activities. Those people who mildly slept, ate deliciously, drank a lot, cracked jokes, after them there is only garbage and emotions that this person experienced. And unfortunately, these selfish people bring a large number of problems to society in which they reside, and accordingly to the entire planet, because the planet suffers most from egoists. Do you accept that this is possible? And while speaking in more casual terms, Vaishya differ from Shudras because a Shudra doesn't even have an opportunity. His selfishness in past lives has driven him into a corner, and now he's in the corner. But a Vaishya, artisan or businessman, has an amount of certain selfishness in his destiny, and at the same time some opportunities that he can still manifest. If there will be a little more selfishness, if he lets selfishness absorb him, he will degrade. Recall your friends who put effort, endure, and grow. And this is a classic example of Vaishya that develop. On the other hand, you can certainly find among your friends those that are fully exposed to their passions, and unlikely they will evolve, their life will not become better. it won't be better, because they're in passions, passions, and passions. The more he will drink, the worse his life will get. The more he will engage in foolishness, the worse his life will get. This is all interconnected. Evolution for Vaishyas is austerity. Partially, austerity is in serving society. Vaishyas must be integrated into society and perform their duties for its development. Well, because let's jump over Kshatriyas for a little. Imagine that a person believes in a conception that he has to practice yoga only and do nothing else. If such a person believes that only yoga and nothing else, in future life nothing good will expect him, because the society works for this person, and this person, it turns out, will only waste his life, which he himself created. Well, because maybe it's not obvious to you. He'll have to repay his debts. Always, if a person believes that yogis are so special, who practice only yoga and all's good, he might degrade to the Shudra level in future life. Why? Because the whole society serves him. For example, he lives in a tenement house, a plumber, Uncle John takes care of hot and cold water supply and pipes. Someone from Vaishya has built big stations which boil this water, which is pumped over so that this person could use it. Someone takes care of electricity. Immigrants are working in the stores so he could have all those things. Did you all imagine this picture clearly? And now imagine that someone just uses it in this life. This may occur because of two reasons. First one, this person has already done all this. Built stations, was a plumber, he prepared a certain basis so that he could live this star life. And that would be the best option, if he went through it all, and in this life he might go into the next level, that he would detach himself from Vaishya category, meaning becoming a brahmin in future life. But that's only if he develops such qualities. And if he did go through it all, like best option, then what factors there should be that he went through it? You mean how to determine? What reasons had he created that he was a plumber or built houses? Greed. He had more passions, so the people who provide services, roughly speaking, to the selfish yogi, they have more selfishness than him on the current stage of development, though he is self-centered also. If you already do this and yoga at the same time, then there is a big chance that... Notice that there is a tenement house, very big building. I've seen a house record holder in the city of Krasnodar. I've never seen such big houses in Russia. Imagine a 5-kilometer street, and along this street there is a building. Can you imagine that? Driving through a dozen of traffic lights, and the house doesn't end. Just like an anthill. In this tenement house, there is probably 1,000 of flats. And how many people would practice yoga there? 100? Well, you're an optimist. No, it won't help. For 1,000 of flats. It's likely with 0.00%, small percentage. Let's say some piece of a yogi lives there as a sparrow on the roof. A very small percentage. So if we consider a certain life of a yogi who are being serviced by personnel, imagine how many consumers who don't even think about that they're wasting their lives away. Most are in full confidence that this is normal. There are people who are in full confidence that God gave them animals so they could kill them and eat them, and all's good. So the problem of a yogi who lives in this tenement house in practice It's a very, very small problem comparing to those people who cannot even suspect what awaits them in future. Going back, we were discussing that the person has accumulated potential, lives in this life, practices and accumulates gratitudes so that he could go this path in future life. And that is absolutely possible. Alright, hold on. Here's a very important moment. If I'll be able to explain it to you, you'll understand everything. Because it's possible going from one level to another. Imagine what this yogi must do, how he must live to become a brahmin in future life. And he'll be born and will have a flat and so on, and nevertheless nobody will bring him down. What do you think? How he should live? Should serve very much. Correct. He must get rid of all selfishness, living only altruism, right? If he'll have an altruistic attitude in life, everything will be good in his future lives. Moreover, if his life will be effective for other people, then all that service personnel I was talking about earlier, they will get a certain percent for their help, because this is interconnected. Without their help, he would not be able to implement those positive deeds which he is capable of doing. Can you assume that? What's your question? If I understood you correctly, one has to fully dedicate himself to yoga, so not to end up on the level of Shudra. But that only if one does yoga on an absolute altruistic basis? Not quite. Altruism not only in terms of material aspect. You'll not be able to survive if you'll only, as the lady said, conduct free classes for 10 people. I assure you, many of us tried. That will not help. For example, a person has a family, all are adequate, all welcome him practicing yoga. They are wealthy enough to make this person be fully devoted to yoga. And he practices, he has such an opportunity, desire, and he wants to do it throughout his life without being distracted by social life. Meaning, so he would not degrade, but upgrade in future life. In this life he has to practice not only for his own development, but to convert his energy for the sake of the others. Roughly speaking, yes, but the thing is that on a certain stage he will practice yoga only for himself anyway, meaning for a certain amount of years he will do yoga selfishly. This is absolutely normal. The question is how he will grow after that selfishness and what result he'll get. In the absolute sense, a yogi must become able to live not for the sake of those illusions that he had in the beginning. Selfish goals, I mean. What have you brought as an example about family is very wide. Let's discuss an example that is more relevant for the most. There's a husband who earns money and a wife who's trying to practice yoga, who's trying to do something in the family and respectively maybe even teaches. A widespread scenario. Turns out the husband helps her change his material energy into some knowledge. After all, what does an appropriate yoga instructor do? He doesn't teach asanas only. He helps people in terms of diet, menu, meaning people will come asking him what they should eat, say to improve their stretching. Of course they will. Will he speak the truth? Of course he will. So how many people would go vegetarian because of this one yogi? What do you think? There's a yogi and he just tells the truth. Very many. Even from one person, right? Imagine we were discussing a situation when there was a house, plumbing, electric stations, other stuff. Let's make another chain. There is a person, a meat consumer. He periodically goes to the shop and there buys sausage or animal body parts, to put it mildly. Well, not at the shop, at the market. Okay, not at the market. We buy from grannies. They have a cow walking around the meadow, and when it has walked enough, so it comes to this granny and says, like, "Granny, kill me please and sell this homemade meat to consumers." And so there are homemade meat or homemade eggs. Actually, it's one and the same, a corpse in any way. What do you think the chain is? Animals born, it lives, and well, if you buy the supermarket, I assure you that supermarket products are only from concentration camps. I mean meat products. Well, the bottom line is that any form of meat you buy at the store, it's what was before it became meat suffered so much you cannot even imagine. And people live year by year consuming this meat. What karma do they create for themselves? What do you think? How many times animals have to be born in order to feed other bodies in these cages? By cages I mean houses. People don't think about that at all. So, believe me, if you break down social life by means of the law of karma, you'll be very much terrified by what laws people live here. For the most people, there is no law of karma. You know, one time I read in the scriptures, in one book, a very harsh statement. It's attributed to Shiva. It says that the denial of the law of karma is the worst spiritual disease there can be. So you may not know the road regulations. If you'll have an accident, it's not a problem. You'll just pay compensation and that's it. You may not know the penal code. You can take a false step. The relatives will help you out to live on. But the denial of the law of karma is very heavy. Nobody will ever save you from that. Rather, they will save, of course, but only if there will be people whom you helped a lot. Then they can pull you from the law of karma for a little. Well, what am I speaking about? Oh, what did I mean? Not that the law of karma will perish, but that the law of karma may come to you in different doses. Each of you has karma to die in this life. Your physical body, it will die. Do you all understand that? It'll just happen after 50 years. 50 years more you'll live. But nevertheless, there's karma. It hangs over you. Can you assume that? Nevertheless, for some, it'll manifest earlier. People die every day. And respectively, how this karma will manifest depends on what immunity you have in relation to karma. There is such a notion, immunity, not only in terms of physiology, but in terms of what karma will come to you. You may get sick, and you may not get sick. You may have 104 degrees temperature, you'll be just lying. And you may have 98 degrees and you'll be doing your duties. Karma is the same, but nevertheless the majority denies the law of karma only because they were not at the right time, not at the right place, and they were taught in schools not the things they needed to be taught. But that's their karma. Here you cannot speak about some kind of injustice, like they piously believe that the sausage is good, that animals don't suffer, like that the animals themselves come to granny and put themselves near so they would be killed. And such illusions exist, unfortunately. Alright, friends, we discussed Vaishyas, and because they're more selfish, they cannot abandon their passions, meaning their passions are important for them. They determine these passions as a kin service, kin duty, saying our kin bequeathed us to, and to go towards that. I'm not arguing that someone bequeathed to do something, no problem, it's just the question is how adequate the person will do it. For Vaishya, a very important phase in his life is education. If a Vaishya starts to realize the kin or family plan too early, he will suffer very much. He has to get a certain education in terms of energy. That's not my point of view, that's the scripture's point of view. Vaishya who is going to live in a society law-abidingly well, he must get a certain moral education in a teacher's gurukula. That was a requirement during more righteous times. Now, of course, there's no such a thing. Now everything is very different. From childhood, a person is taught how to count, how to write, and respectively how to implement certain functions in a society. He's not taught moral guidelines. Why are there certain hard precepts for Vaishya? Because Vaishyas are sick with selfishness, and selfishness is a problem for society, understand? Because the one who is more selfish, well, he respectively takes all for himself and under himself. Concerning this topic, there is a rather curious film. It's called The Secret. Not recommend in any way, but if you didn't watch it, getting to know it in an educational aspect would be curious. This movie's primary motivation is that if you want to get everything from life, you need to believe in it and dream about it every day. And they directly examine the technology, how to dream, how to attract money. There's a lot of talk about money. Why am I smiling? Because people who recommend this don't understand that on that meadow where they gather to extract money, other people do exist. And if there is one special person who's trying to get everything for himself, what's going to be left for others? And how much will they agree with the way of things this person creates for himself? This is extremely dangerous. Alright, go next. Knights. A knight becomes a knight if he is a sincere fighter for justice. He cannot pass by any injustice, any imperfection. He is trying to improve, he is trying to intervene. He is the knight because from one life to another, he was always trying to be not indifferent. He at least put his selfish intentions to the side and tried learning to solve social problems. And yes, I understand that a knight can have also plenty of oddities. They are very proud, and their pride is just that float, which prevents them from diving into selfish passions. But nevertheless, they try to do something positive in life. Respectively, this is a man who most often knows how to live his own way. While they are more self-disciplined than Vaishyas, but they also have certain oddities. For Kshatriyas or knights, it is very important to get training, meaning for many years they engage in self-development or somehow put efforts towards their progression. If Vaishyas are lazy, Kshatriyas will grow and develop. This is their main difference. He has more will, even due to his pride, and he will put more effort to his development. Either on the mat or doesn't matter, but at least there will be evolution. In modern society, there are a lot of selfish and greedy people who are trying to become knights. It happens, but as they say, it's the times we live in. Well, let's hope for the best, that among Kshatriyas or knights will be more and more lucid, conscious people, so then the society will change for the better. If you draw a certain parallel, there is such a point of view that Shudras, Vaishyas, knights and wizards differ from one another in the percentage of selfishness in their lives, meaning the percentage of those dependencies and passions that observe the person. Let's make a comparison. If, let's say, 90% is selfishness, 10% is altruism. Let's make such a table. Okay, let's see at the table. A Shudra has 90% of selfish motivations, and 10% it's what he can do. A Vaishya has much less, say 70% to 30. A Knight has probably 50 to 50. And this is absolutely approximate. Of course, this is no statistics. These are figures that determine why people fall into some bad situations. A wizard should have, one should aspire to this by the way, 70% of altruism, 30% are those selfish things that they need to survive in the society. This selfishness-altruism correlation completely determines the gradual human reincarnation. Naturally, they do not go from one level to another in one lifetime. We cannot expect that the Shudra suddenly becomes an altruist and suddenly reincarnates almost at the level of brahmin. Such things do not happen. This is a very long process from one life to another. For a Shudra, for example, to go from his state of a complete loss to a brahmin may require hundreds of thousands lives. But nevertheless, he may crawl to this state, and here, even if he desires, the life of a brahmin attracts him. Again, everything may go like with that flat, where a consumer lives and there are people who provide service to him. If this wizard has a lot of selfishness, in future life he will still degrade to Shudra, and so from one life to another, riding high, not riding at all, ups and downs. And to escape from this wheel is very difficult, incredibly difficult. Unfortunately, those who are standing out are selfish Brahmins of modern India, who use tourists and everything around them to get any material benefit for them to live. If you look at this table and now accept that this is possible, then this will determine your adequate actions, which you will make. Why? Because you do understand that when you'll come home, the same old passions will come back, or quarrels that you've left for some time. Yes, maybe the last 5 days you are trying to change your energy, and yes, maybe you will have to deal with those problems, but because of the energy you have accumulated now, you might overcome them for some time. And the only question is, how will you overcome them? How unselfishly will it be? And will they come back again? And so in order for them to not come back again, I mean problems, become an altruist, if it's possible. It's a little strange, but it's probably the only way to survive. You haven't spoken about the wizard family. Do you plan to have one? Please tell us. Of course, I'll tell you. They are not ordinary. A husband and a wife who take this path will be different from average egoists. I'm just trying to give you some life examples so it would be more or less clear to you. But these people have different views on reality. They have to be out of this world a little. Therefore, they have a life that not really like most people have. So, how to get such a family? Well, you have to be on this level. Then the woman of the same level will be attracted to you. And we somehow try to talk about karma. What affects karma? What we can change or cannot change? We can influence the manifestation of karma. Let's assume that there is some sort of a person. This person has several development options, depending on the energy this person will have. Well, there are like 2 scenarios. Right. I don't know to raise this table, it's so important. What? Oh, it doesn't matter. Right, there's the person. And we have 2 scenarios. In one case, he will have some blue events. In another, some green events. They will be different. Here, on the one hand, there is no choice, of course, but only versions of the events that are conditioned to some degree. If, for example, we use these blue and green colors to draw a family, which we are trying to speak about, in this case, the man's qualities determine what woman will be nearby him. And here we are talking only about family. As a result, there will be different children in both cases. And really, they will be different. Yes, from the Slavic viewpoint, they say children come from their kin, your kin, meaning a man gets children who were his kin. Are you aware of this concept? No, this is an idealistic concept that there is a son. When he grows up, his son may be his grandfather. Is that clear? And the grandson's son will be the father of the son. They're incarnate into each other, roughly speaking.
Если по времени там половозрелость, так сказать, что он может родить, то значит рожается. Ну, такая идеалистическая. Значит, прадед, да. Теоретически, да.
But you know, the thing is that in every kin there are people with different potential, meaning they are both not bright and very wise people. And the question is, what people from this kin will be your children? In fact, it depends on lots of things, but at the very beginning, everything depends on the person's energy, because this energy will attract. And no matter how beautiful you are, no matter how wealthy, this is all secondary. Energy is primary. It's the energy that will determine everything, the events that will follow. The worst thing is when people are in a hurry. Brahmins theoretically should never hurry. That is, on the contrary, they should postpone making any decisions so that the solution would come to them by itself. Not rushing towards it, but it will come by itself. Do you understand what's the difference? Well, when a person rushes, he creates a problem for himself. Why? Because the man is expected to evolve, meaning he must evolve, and at different stages of that evolution, he will have different concepts of ideology. So it's like what you want while you're at the age of 20, for example. You think, Masha is my ideal. In 30 years, you won't speak the same. When you will accumulate life experience, you'll understand that Masha becomes a honey, and then a honey bunny, and so on and so forth, and it becomes very ugly, and you will no longer like it. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but you can feel the logic here. Therefore, after every period of time, people that you like will change. For Brahmin, it's preferably to reach such a consciousness energy level that when making decisions, he would see very far that would not bring him unhappiness. Because Brahmins cannot really have any unhappiness. Because a person who is conscious doesn't really enjoy this world. Similarly, certain karmic events that you're looking forward to, you are not always able to understand them. The stronger the wizard's or soothsayer's sensitive power is, meaning reading information, the more rationally he looks at things. So happiness itself is different. His happiness is to serve, for example. Did a good deed, the day was not for nothing. Did nothing, a day wasted. So sun's shining, rain's raining, it's all secondary. Primary is what he managed to do for others. I try to explain to you the degree of altruism and at the same time the degree of selfishness. And for a wizard, serving is the main theme throughout his life. He must always do something for others, every minute trying to do something, respectively. The choice that this person will make depends on his level. Is that clear? If there will be strong, adequate energy. I heard that for a wizard, a family is like an anchor. Not quite. Well, not exactly, but generally speaking. There are not two wizards alike. But for an adequate, the one you're talking about, who goes into society, teaches, he is not likely to see his family. And why? Well, why a family then? You know, if I live like a family man, it's unlikely to be good. So I travel and I teach, and children can understand the fact that they almost don't see their father, and it would be strange if father was playing with them. I'm waiting till they grow up, then I will talk to them. But how they are without a father, is it normal? For them, it's absolutely normal. I mean, I text them, they text me, we're close. Please understand this correctly. Naturally, such a father as I gets such children. They knew it would be this way, roughly speaking. Well, back to the kids of Brahmin who's trying to live in a world, or, as Vasily said, a family, which would be like a burden. I'm not saying it's in all cases, but mostly. Can you agree that there are not two Brahmins alike, and that they will perform different roles? Therefore, it's not possible to say whether you said correctly or not. In some cases, perhaps, the family will be a burden for a Brahmin wizard. In some it won't, and in some, on the contrary, it will even help. Why? If you are destined to give birth to certain children, for example, in this life, according to karma, these certain children will come to you. If you are a more or less rational person, you'll see how this society progresses and how this society will influence your children, meaning what things it will teach them. Then you'll find the strength to practice for the sake of the children. But it may not be yoga, but some righteous deeds, for example. Maybe because of your children you will not become a selfish yogi, but will do good and healthy things for the society. Can you assume that? Because if you live by yourself, like all's good, it's like, why should I care? Karma's good, plumber's working, health is okay, maybe I'll do some altruistic deeds. I guess my reincarnation will be okay, right? And when you'll have children, you'll understand that if your children degrade, you degrade right after. So you'll put a lot more effort. I don't want to go into the details. Everything is a lot more complicated. Alright, let's take a period of time which we describe schematically. Alright, here are 100 years. And here, in 20 years, the man decides to marry, have children, and etc. And children are only children just for a little period of time in the scale from 20 to 100 years. Alright, for 20 years they're just children, but then they become your partners, your friends. You and them are in completely different relationship. And keep in mind that in this case I mean children of Brahmins, who were born from Brahmins, who has the potential of Brahmins. Of course, if we consider an example of children who are consumers, then it's hell for life. And at the age of 30, such a child, to put it mildly, will be a headache for his parents. So in this case of Brahmin, everything is quite different. Children are children only for a certain number of years. 10, 15, 20 years will pass very quickly, and children will be a very good help for their parent. From this perspective, everything is okay, and moreover, these children are not called children. These are friends who reincarnate with him, perhaps from one life to another, and understand each other perfectly. They have no problems because if the children look up to their parents, they behave quite differently. Because the main problem of most children is that the parents are not respected. Parents say one thing, children another, because children are brought up by the media, movies, and other institutions that exist in the society. And what do they bring up? Selfishness. And selfishness is poison for the family, meaning a selfish child in the family is virtually a hell for the whole family. And Brahmin, if he's smart, he doesn't bring up selfishness in his children. And if a woman is on the path of development over several years with one partner, and then there is a change, haven't I understood properly? What's your question? You go ahead, I'll clear this up. If you didn't understand, maybe I said something. I don't want to mix everything in one, but for example, Tarsunov says that breaking up is not good, that you should always try to serve the person until the last drop. And if it still does not work, maybe only then you can try and separate. But your concept is also connected with castes. By that I mean concerning the change of partner. It has nothing to do with costs, because costs and partner changes, that's two different things. It's like soup and apples. Soup is an already cooked product, but apples still need to grow. And costs is one thing, but whether your partner will reach your cost is quite another thing. Usually it takes a lot of time for a brahmin to educate his wife. First, he must break off nonsense from selfishness. This is a very long process. This process continues for a long time, but nevertheless, if you have a karmic relationship with the person, he will endure it all. That is, the person you are trying to lead, if there is no karmic relationship, will not endure. We can argue for a long time, but life will quickly put everything on the right place and explain everything. What's your question? Denis Malinov in his lecture says that Brahmin really doesn't care about what woman to marry. It's all by karma. You may marry the first you laid your eyes upon and live with her. Why, you can try, of course. Maybe you will succeed in it, but such a notion as first you laid your eyes on? Excuse me, yesterday you liked one thing, tomorrow it's another thing, the day after it's different again. Where's the first? The one that was yesterday, today, or tomorrow? There's one criterion. Please understand that the woman should serve her husband, and at the level at which someone of you is trying to look for a woman, never look for beauty, never for the money, no matter how rich she is. It's all conventionalities. Any woman in 20 years won't be of the same beauty that you liked, that's a fact. And money is also not limitless, and that also cannot be the criterion. Most important is to serve, that is, if a woman will serve you, if she will help you somehow. This is a fundamental leitmotif of her soul. If you see a woman altruist who is trying to serve, that's the best. All other factors, the length of her heel, something else, that's all secondary. You said that if a woman teaches yoga, her husband sponsors her, and she lives on his money, then it turns out that with her practice she works off for both of them? Either earns or works off, it's not known. Either she was such a husband or she will be such a husband, it's not important. What's important is how she lives, on what she will spend her time, her energy. The husband, he helps in this case because he would help anyway. If she hadn't taught yoga, he would have helped anyway because she's doing something at home. The only question is how high and adequate this woman's life efficiency as a teacher is. On the one hand, she can benefit too many. On the other hand, you're right. If the money is earned not the righteous way, it will be very difficult. I can give you an example. One lady told me such a story. Well, her father is a policeman, and she is still a young girl, 20 years old or something like that, still lives with her family, but the one who earns money is the father policeman. Is that clear? Well, we live in a legal state, are we not? What did you think? Well, I thought about different thing. Well, here's the bottom line. She told me that her practice begins when he's on duty. When he comes, she cannot do anything. She becomes all stiff. And she's his daughter naturally. So he was on duty, and there are not the best conditions in which he works. I mean, this is a very stressful job, it's very hard. Just imagine those people who always cry, when people die, people shoot and other things. So, I cannot say that they have a sweet life, but a very bitter one. But nonetheless, she said that when he comes from service, she cannot practice, and she lives on his money. So what's the solution? To change the situation or to live at your own expense?
Или живи за свой счет, да, совершенно верно. Да, построй-ка поселение сначала, потом живи там, что, мелочь какая, да?
There's also one important moment. A yoga teacher can quite fully provide for himself, but not during the first year. During the first year, some support is needed. We are talking about some assets he saved, or the second option, there is a family that supports him. There are many examples when a male-female yoga instructor in the final outcome earns more than the person who provided with the financial support. I'm talking about an ordinary person who lives without much thinking. The difference between the ordinary person who lives on the average wage of 50,000 rubles in Moscow, right? No? Less? All right, 40, 50. Who? A security guard? I don't really think that there are many security guards who practice yoga. That would be office workers, something like that, or staff. Well, I'm trying to explain that Vaishyas, Knights, Shudras, they live and don't even know in what direction their lives are headed, meaning which social service system works to ensure their life in this apartment. So much karma gets accumulated, and so fast, that their lives in principle begin to change for the worse. Teachers have a diametrically opposite situation. Yes, they experience difficulties in the beginning, and surviving is much harder. However, they do not accumulate the karma that will only worsen the situation and life. And this is a very important point, although perhaps you do not now understand it in full scale. If we consider an average man who works somewhere in some company earning some money, whether he likes it or not, he will have to be involved in some karmic processes. And business gives money if there is some not good karma being involved in. And it's always like this. The more money you get, the more karmic debt will be. Can you assume that? And there is no such thing, it's all fairy tales like, lots of money and lots of goodness. Though yogis may have that theoretically, but not during the first 10 years, when he can hold a seminar, for example, and live for a few months on the money from that seminar. This is possible, but not during the first years. The first years are hard for everybody. So it turns out that the only way out is to become a yoga teacher? I always say this. But there is a good kind of business. Really? Like food store. Really? But why not? There are 4 divine professions, like priests, doctors, and teachers, and... Alright, friends. I'll have to hold you for a little longer, because I cannot just go and pass by this theme. Let's discuss this good food, just for a little. Good food sale. Yeah, you got that right. Well, how should I start? Alright, service providing system. Well, when you satisfy someone's passion, when there is a person's passion, and you're trying to satisfy that passion. Well, no matter what it is, for some it's sausage, for some raw lunch, and so on, but it's satisfying human passions. And that's incredibly dangerous. But you will only realize this danger when you'll become yoga teachers yourselves. Do you know how many teachers cry when they cannot control their Manipura chakra? They understand everything, but just cannot stop eating. That's a fact. Why? Because in past lives they had a health food shop. Don't laugh. That's all interconnected. A lady that cooks for her husband. Do you know what will happen to them in future? She cooks deliciously and the husband eats and says, "Oh, thank you, I'm full." I understand that this doesn't add up to these, as you say, divine actions, but we're talking about yoga now. to satisfy another person's passion is dangerous for your future, because you are given the energy from a certain chakra. If you don't have enough qualification for recycling that energy, the passions will enslave you. I can quote one of my yogi friends who said something like this: I'm crying and eating at the same time, and this is the reality, and this is a top-level teacher who still suffers from some kind of karma of a little lofty shop with food. Understand me correctly. I'm by no means telling you that all your work activities are bad. I don't know what you're doing for life, but you've just mentioned a good activity. For example, a doctor, a teacher, even a priest. Understand, here you said that only a teacher's life is the correct life. Try to be in my shoes. I am a teacher myself, and I say to you, friends, only a yoga teacher can be adequate. From a business perspective, just look at what I'm doing. I'm making competition for myself. Have you ever seen a business like this? Like you go into the shop and network marketing? They sell something together. These are different things. In network marketing, more gets the one who initiated the sale. We have a diametrically opposite situation. This is tantamount to the shop. Like, I'm a baker, I bake bread and say, why have you come here to buy my bread? Are you weird? Take flour, water, here's the recipe, go ahead and cook. Can you imagine such a baker? And we are doing the same thing right here. We say to you, why you're coming to us for practice? Go ahead and teach, this is the only way. So it turns out I'm preparing my competitors, but after all, there must be a catch. What am I doing this for, right? There should be a catch. What's the catch? What do you think? Who's yours that you will accumulate? It turns out there are some people you will be teaching them, they will give you their gratitude and will be sitting on the curb, but we also want gratitude for ourselves, right? This is classical egoist thinking. Egoists will never teach yoga. Hence, why am I doing this? What do you think? But what about the catch? What's the catch? So everything would change to recycle bad energies. It's easier when together. That's a little cynical of you. There is also a 5% theory. What? 45 or 5? Yes. It's like the more the good people, the world will change for the better, right? Yes, you're correct. But 3% according to the statistics. But nevertheless, from a business perspective, it's strange what we're doing here. Can you assume that? Yes. In Eastern practice, there is an opinion that yoga should be taught not by anyone. Iyengar himself was frightened with so many teachers he brought up, and that were inadequate. Even his uncle didn't allow him to practice yoga until the age of 40. No, not true. Iyengar, no, absolutely not true. His uncle, Krishnamacharya, founder of, roughly speaking, modern Iyengar and modern Ashtanga and Vinyasa yoga, he didn't let him practice yoga because he didn't believe that his nephew would survive. He was ill with tuberculosis and was very weak. Just let him die a natural death. Such was his uncle. But a year later, he allowed him, and after 3 years, Iyengar himself started teaching. That is, 3 years after he began learning, he taught at girls' school in Delhi, drove bike there and taught. But that point of view which you expressed really exists, but it wasn't Iyengar's. That point of view is to teach not all, but only those who are successful. It's like He practiced, and became such a practitioner. And now I teach and you listen to me. Just kidding, The bottom line is that this viewpoint is spread by teachers who genuinely... they genuinely, based on their distinction, see, alright, there's Petrov, a half-wit, who makes people sit in Padmasana at the first lesson. People injure their knees, so they judge objectively. And in their own way, they're right. But if you will consider in terms of the law of karma and in principle, I know many examples that will prove what I will tell you now. According to the law of karma, even if each one of you will teach, you'll teach only those people who are karmically connected with you. Roughly speaking, you have a certain karmic connection with the people on this planet. Only from you these people can hear certain things, like about vegetarianism or about something else. Even if my videos will be everywhere on the internet, these people, according to their karma, will not be able to even hear about them. For certain reasons, only you can give them knowledge, and each one of you has approximately the same situation. So in this case, it's not business at all. Really, this is a process of changing the world around you. The more sensible and healthy teachers, the better the world. That's a fact. Why? Because the teacher will no longer practice for himself. Do you understand what I'm talking about? If you practice yoga, sometimes you practice, sometimes you don't practice, sometimes feeling lazy, sometimes you are not lazy, well, all is by chance. But the teacher has more responsibility not for himself, not for his yoga, but for the people he teaches. That's why he finds strength to make an effort while another just takes a step back. This is to some extent is very important for the development. But if a teacher is at the level of Vaishya, will he not acquire bad karma teaching yoga? Because already being with all kinds of vices. All people are Vaishyas. Who come to the teacher's course, all are Vaishyas. Moreover, some % of them are Shudras. I feel absolutely calm about that. There are people who come to teach because of ambitions, and I feel absolutely calm about that too. No problems at all. Really doesn't matter who a person is at the stage of development. Moreover, there are yoga schools where they check your stretching, the asanas you can do. If you do this asana, you pass. Alright. Cannot do it, you won't be taught. Go away, go prepare at home, and so on. All of this is nonsense. Why? Because your level of stretching or something else has actually no value. Because if you study, you will learn it gradually. There are people who constitutionally have such physiology that they will never do some asanas. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Well, you have hip joints, right? Physiologically, joints of some people are such that they will never do such asanas like Samakanasana. Never. It's not possible because their joints cannot go out of their joint cavities due to karma. So what? Because of this he cannot teach? This is nonsense. Well, he won't do the Samakanasana, and so what? Someone will suffer from it? No one. What's important is the knowledge the person has and his past lives. For me personally, these are the most important things, because it's incredibly interesting to observe how a person showing the light of knowledge that he's never even read about in his life. Understand my point? They start to tell what comes to them at the level of intuition or thought. This is the most interesting. Because many things you won't be able to find in books, but you can hear them from a person who pulls this knowledge from his inner world. That's the subject of past lives, right? Almost we have gradually moved to that. But what should I do if at this stage I don't want to be a yoga teacher? What's my option? Practice, engage in self-development. I mean, you don't have to be engaged with a large audience. You can just take one person and help him practice. This is also teaching. Well, roughly speaking, this trick, well, does exist. Understand, why do you want to get some things? Because a certain knowledge is formed within you, and you've walked a long way to this, and it is like a train that moves on a certain tracks. Naturally, you can't just take another direction. Such things do not happen. And naturally, you must implement the goals that you, your parents set, and so on. Teaching may be for you, on the one hand, a hobby. Most importantly, please understand that the teacher behaves far more responsibly concerning his practice. Understood? Well, if you have... he behaves far more responsibly concerning many events and things because he cannot afford himself to do many things. Is that clear? Respectively, in this case, teaching is considered as a form of practice itself. If you want to develop, then start teaching. Your development will go much faster, that's a fact. You will start to live no longer for yourself, but for the others. Well, imagine you begin to teach 5 of your friends. If one person changes his life for the better, you'll really see that he practiced and he began to improve. You'll obviously see that you'll have a pair of wings growing. All you need is to see one such person and you'll understand that your life isn't for nothing. You don't just consume and go shopping, but you see people who were influenced by you for the better. It's very rare. It's much easier to sow negativity, greed, and some other things, but to grow within a person some consciousness or more adequate attitude is of very big value. When I was trying to tell you that if a person begins to live adequately, all social services benefit from it. Why? Well, please try to imagine, once there was Petrov, and he had a double karma. On the one hand to degrade, and on the other to evolve. And for example, Sidorov appeared, who was able to help Petrov not to degrade, but to evolve. Can you imagine how good this would be for the entire planet if there would be one selfish person less? And I'm not saying this metaphorically. This is a real deal. Indeed, this would be good for the planet because one selfish person consumes very much. And in this case, the planet will thank you that in future lives you will be wealthy and you will practice and grow because you are serving the planet as a whole. Have all of you heard that? This is why, my friends, it's just profitable for your development to teach.